I stood on our front porch with arms full of groceries when I heard the deadbolt slide shut from the inside. The metallic click echoed in the quiet afternoon. Trent was staring right at me through the living room window, drink in hand, face completely blank. Not angry, not sad, just empty. He raised his phone and mouthed two words, "Check your email." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I set the grocery bags down carefully on the welcome mat, pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The email subject line said, "Dissolution of marriage, action required." I opened it. Divorce papers. Fully prepared. Already filed with the county clerk. No warning.
No conversation.
No explanation about why or when he decided our marriage was over. Just legal documents with a note at the bottom in his handwriting. Sign it by Friday or don't come back. I looked up at the window. He was still watching me.
Still holding that drink.
Still wearing that blank expression like I was a stranger. Like 14 years meant absolutely nothing. My name is Melissa Conway. I'm 39 years old. I've been married to Trent for 14 years. We have a 12-year-old son named Miles. And until that moment standing on our porch, I thought we were working through a rough patch. The kind every marriage goes through. We'd been distant lately, sleeping in separate rooms sometimes, not talking as much. But I thought we were just stressed. Money had been tight. His job was demanding. Miles was having trouble at school. Normal life stuff that normal couples deal with. I never imagined Trent was planning an exit strategy. He'd always been cold, practical, logical to a fault. I used to call it stoic. Admired his ability to stay calm during crisis. Now I understood it wasn't strength. It was indifference dressed up as maturity. He didn't feel things deeply, didn't connect emotionally. I'd spent 14 years trying to warm up someone who preferred the cold. And now he was locking me out like I was a stranger trespassing on property that didn't belong to me. I tried every key I had. Front door, side door,
Garage door.
None of them worked. He'd changed all the locks while I was at the grocery store. Planned it perfectly. Timed it so I'd be gone just long enough. I called his phone. It rang once then went to voicemail. Called again. Same thing. He was inside watching me panic. Enjoying it probably. I tried the doorbell.
Knocked.
Nothing. The groceries were melting on the porch. Ice cream dripping through the bag. I didn't know what to do. Where to go. I sat on the porch steps and stared at my phone. Read the divorce papers again, trying to understand. They cited irreconcilable differences. No details. No reasons. Just legal language about the dissolution of our marital partnership. That night, I slept in my car parked in the driveway. The driveway of a house I'd cleaned and cooked in and raised our son in for 10 years. I could see lights on inside. See shadows moving past windows. My family continuing without me like I'd already been erased. The next morning, a police officer met me on the front lawn. I'd been trying the doorbell again, hoping Trent would let me get some clothes at least. The officer was young, uncomfortable. He asked my name and checked his notes. "Ma'am, the homeowner reported you for attempted unlawful entry. Says you don't live here anymore." I stared at him, explained this was my house. My husband had locked me out illegally. We were married. I had rights. The officer pulled up something on his tablet, shook his head. "Your name's not on the property deed, ma'am. According to county records, Trent Conway is the sole owner. I can't help you without proof of residency." I felt my face go hot. My name should be on that deed. We'd bought this house together. Both signed the mortgage papers. The officer handed me a card for legal aid. Said I needed to sort it out through the courts. Then he asked me to leave the property. I stood there humiliated. On my own grass. In front of neighbors watching through windows. Walked back to my car feeling like a criminal. 2 days later, I drove past the house during the day. Through the living room window, I saw her. Blonde hair. Younger than me. Maybe early 30s. Wearing my bathrobe. The white terry cloth one I'd gotten for Christmas. She was laughing at something. Poured wine into the crystal glasses we'd received for our 10th anniversary. The ones I'd carefully hand-washed after every special occasion. She moved through my kitchen like she belonged there. Like she'd already replaced me completely. I called Trent's phone from a different number. He answered. "Where's Miles?" I asked. My voice shook. "At a friend's house," he said casually.
He's fine.
"Don't call this number again." He hung up. Our son was being shuffled around while his father moved another woman into our home. Miles had no idea his life was being torn apart. Had no idea I'd been thrown out. Probably thought I'd left him willingly. The thought made me physically sick. I pulled over and threw up in a gas station parking lot. I finally got access to our old paperwork from a storage unit I'd rented years ago. Pulled up the original mortgage documents from when we bought the house 10 years ago. My name had been on everything then. Both our names listed as co-owners. Both our signatures on every page. But when I searched the county property records online, only Trent's name appeared. The deed had been modified 6 months ago. He'd refinanced the entire mortgage without telling me. Removed my name from the title completely. I wasn't listed anywhere. Like I'd never owned any part of our home. But he'd made one critical mistake. I had copies of every original document. And when I compared signatures, something jumped out. The signature on the refinancing papers didn't match mine. The loops were wrong. The spacing off. Trent had forged my signature on legal documents. That was fraud. That was illegal. That was finally something I could use. I took photos of everything. Made copies. Locked the originals in a safety deposit box at my sister's bank. This was my ammunition. I had my first panic attack in the parking lot of a lawyer's office. Couldn't breathe. Vision went spotty. A paralegal found me gasping against my car. Brought me water. Walked me inside slowly. The attorney's name was Kyle Preston. He looked over my documents with a tired expression. Said the forgery would take time to prove in court. Months probably. Maybe longer. Trent had been planning this carefully, for half a year at least. Every move calculated. Every document prepared. Every escape route mapped. Cal explained that family court moved slowly. That proving fraud required evidence and expert testimony. That I'd need money for a forensic document examiner. Money I didn't have since Trent controlled all our accounts. He gave me a payment plan option. Said he'd take the case but couldn't promise quick results. I left his office feeling more hopeless than when I arrived. Trent had planned this perfectly. Trapped me financially, legally, emotionally. I'd never felt so powerless in my entire life. I showed up to a mutual friend's dinner party the following week. Hadn't been invited, but went anyway. Needed to see people who knew us. Needed witnesses to what was happening. Trent and the new girlfriend were already there. Her name was Monica, apparently. She sat close to him, hand on his knee, playing the perfect couple. Our friend Harrison was hosting. He looked uncomfortable when I walked in. Everyone went quiet. Trent stood up with his wine glass. Smiled that practiced smile he used for work presentations. "I'm finally free from the emotional weight," he announced to the room. "Sometimes you don't realize how heavy a burden is until you set it down." People laughed nervously, clinked their glasses. No one looked at me standing in the doorway. No one asked my side of the story. They'd already decided I was the problem, the difficult wife, the emotional burden. Monica squeezed his hand supportively. I turned around and left. Drove to my sister's apartment. Cried for 3 hours straight. Those people weren't my friends. They'd never been. Miles asked me a question that broke my heart. We were having lunch at a diner. One of the few times Trent allowed me supervised visitation with my own son. "Mom, did you do something wrong? Dad said you're being difficult. That you don't want the divorce to be peaceful." He was 12 years old. Holding a burger he wasn't eating. Looking at me with confused eyes. Wanting to understand why his family was falling apart. I wanted to scream. To tell him everything his father had done. The lies. The manipulation. The cruelty of locking me out. But I couldn't. Couldn't poison my child against his father, no matter how much Trent deserved it. "Sometimes people lie when they're trying to cover something up," I said carefully. "Adults make mistakes. Big ones sometimes. But none of this is your fault, and I love you more than anything." Miles nodded slowly. didn't look convinced. Trent's version of events was probably more believable, more coherent, less emotional. I was losing my son to lies I couldn't fight against without hurting him more. My debit card declined at a gas station 2 weeks after being locked out. I tried it 3 times. Each time the machine beeped rejection. The cashier looked at me with pity. I called the bank from my car. They explained that the joint account had been closed. Funds transferred to a new account with only one name. Trent's name. Everything we'd saved over 14 years.
Gone.
Moved without my permission or signature. The bank representative said, technically, it wasn't theft. Both names on a joint account had equal right to withdraw everything. It happened in divorces, constantly. Legal but cruel.
My attorney said the same thing.
It's considered marital property.
He's just reallocating.
We can fight for it in court, but that takes time. I had $218 to my name. Money I'd kept in an old wallet. Emergency cash from years ago. That was it. Everything else was gone. I couldn't afford rent. Couldn't pay Kyle's retainer. Could barely feed myself. Trent had made sure I had nothing to fight back with. Monica sent me an email the next day. I'd never given her my email address. She must have gotten it from Trent. The subject line said, "Moving forward." The message was worse. She wrote that I was making this harder than it needed to be. That Trent deserved happiness after years of an unfulfilling marriage. That clinging to the house was only hurting Miles. That if I really loved my son, I'd sign the papers and let them build a healthy family environment. She signed it with compassion, Monica. I read it 5 times. Each time getting angrier. This woman who'd never met me. Who'd moved into my home. Who was sleeping in my bed and wearing my bathrobe. She thought she could lecture me about my own child. About my own marriage. About what was best for my family. I deleted the email. Then undeleted it. Forwarded it to Kyle. He replied immediately. Save everything she sends. This shows consciousness of guilt. She knows what they did was wrong. Monica had just handed me evidence, without realizing it. I remembered something important. Trent always printed everything. Never trusted digital records. Said paper couldn't be hacked or deleted. Our old filing cabinet was probably still in the garage. If he hadn't cleared it out yet. I drove by the house at 2 in the morning when I knew he'd be asleep. Tried the garage side door. It was unlocked. Slipped inside quietly. Found the filing cabinet in the corner. Used my phone flashlight to search through folders. Found something he'd forgotten to shred. A wire transfer document from 8 months ago. $40,000 moved to a shell company in Arizona. Sterling Holdings, LLC. The transfer happened during our marriage. From our joint investment account. But I'd never seen this company name before. Never approved any transfer. I took photos of everything. Front and back.
Dates.
Account numbers. Signatures. This was hidden money. Secret assets. Exactly the kind of thing judges hated. I slipped back out before anyone noticed. Sent the photos to Kyle immediately. Kyle referred me to a different attorney. Someone who specialized in cases like mine. Her name was Darla Hayes. She was in her 50s with sharp eyes and silver hair cut short. Used to work in real estate fraud before switching to family law. She looked at my documents spread across her conference table. Studied the forged signature. The wire transfer. Monica's email. The timeline of events. I've seen cleaner crimes committed by drug dealers, she said finally. This is sloppy. Amateur hour. But winnable if we play it right. She explained that Trent had made multiple mistakes. The forged signature was obvious, once examined properly. The hidden money was discoverable through subpoenas. Monica's email showed they'd planned this together. We built a strategy. Darla would take the case on contingency. Get paid when we won. But I'd need to stay strong. Stay quiet. Let Trent think he'd won. Meanwhile, we'd be building an airtight case that would destroy him in court. I felt hope for the first time in weeks. I took a job stocking shelves at a 24-hour supermarket. Night shift. 11 at night until 5 in the morning. It was hard work. Physical.
Exhausting.
But it paid cash weekly. Under the table. Darla told me not to use any shared funds or credit cards. Don't give Trent any way to track my income or movements. I worked those brutal hours, then showered at my sister's apartment. Slept a few hours on her couch. Applied for low-income legal aid to supplement Darla's help.
Kept moving. Kept fighting. Kept breathing.
My body ached constantly. I'd lost 15 pounds from stress and irregular meals. But I was surviving.
Barely.
Some mornings I'd drive past the house before work. See lights on in Miles's bedroom. Wonder if he was okay. If he missed me. If Trent was poisoning him against me more each day. Those mornings were the hardest. But they also made me more determined. I would get my home back. Get my son back.
Get my life back.
Trent would learn what happened when you underestimated someone you thought was broken. The school called me frantically one afternoon. Miles had a fever of 102. He was in the nurse's office asking for his mom, but they couldn't reach the listed emergency contact. I was confused. I'd always been his emergency contact. First on the list. I drove there immediately. The school secretary looked uncomfortable. Explained that the emergency contact list had been updated 2 weeks ago. Only Trent's name and Monica's name were listed now. My name had been completely removed. I wasn't even listed as an alternate. I showed them my ID. Proved I was Miles's mother. They let me take him home to my sister's apartment. But I was furious. Terrified. Trent had erased me from every system, starting with the one that mattered most. Our child. What if something serious happened? What if Miles needed me and couldn't reach me? Darla filed an emergency motion that same day. Demanded I be restored to all school and medical records. The judge granted it within 48 hours. But the damage was done. Trent was playing dirty. Dirtier than I'd imagined. In his court filings, Trent included a therapy summary claiming I was unfit to parent. Said I had untreated depression and anxiety. That I'd been emotionally unstable for years. That Miles was afraid of my mood swings. The document was signed by a therapist named Dr. Caroline Hughes. I stared at that signature. Something felt wrong. I'd seen my actual therapist's signature dozens of times. Dr. Patricia Vance. This didn't match. The loops were different. The slant was off. I called Dr. Vance immediately. Asked if she'd ever been contacted by Trent's attorney. She said no. Never. She'd never written any such report. I sent her the document. She confirmed it was completely fraudulent. Darla called it out in court. Loudly. Officially. Submitted Dr. Vance's sworn statement that she'd never written or signed such a report. The judge paused. Looked at Trent's attorney with cold eyes. Asked who Dr. Hughes was. Trent's lawyer stammered. Said he'd verify the source. That was our first real win. The judge was finally seeing through the lies. Miles told me something disturbing during one of our supervised visits. We were eating pizza at a family restaurant. He seemed nervous. Kept looking around like he was afraid someone would hear. "Mom, something's weird about my new room," he said quietly. I asked what he meant. He leaned closer. "There's a tiny red in the smoke detector. It blinks sometimes." Dad said it's just the battery indicator, but it never blinked before. My blood went cold.
A camera.
Trent had put a surveillance camera in our son's bedroom. To watch him. To gather evidence. To control every aspect of Miles's life. Or worse, to catch me saying something he could use against me during visits. I told Miles to show me next time he noticed it. Took photos when I picked him up for the next visit. The smoke detector had a tiny lens barely visible. I filed for an emergency hearing immediately. Darla presented the evidence to a judge. Secret surveillance of a minor without consent. Potentially illegal depending on state law. The judge ordered it removed immediately. Trent's control was slipping. Darla subpoenaed everything. Emails. Financial records. Text messages.
Wire transfers.
Phone records. Everything Trent thought was private. His attorney fought it hard. Filed 3 motions to limit discovery. But the judge was tired of games. Approved everything. When the documents arrived, we found gold. An email from Trent to Monica from 7 months ago. It said exactly this. Once she's out, I'll sign the house over to you. She won't fight me. She never fights back. She's too emotional to think clearly. He'd been planning to give Monica my house. The house I'd helped pay for. The house we'd raised Miles in. He'd underestimated me completely. Assumed I'd crumble. Assumed I'd sign papers quietly and disappear. That email became Exhibit A in our case. Proof of premeditated fraud. Proof of intent to steal marital assets. Proof that everything Trent claimed about wanting a fair divorce was a lie. Darla smiled when she read it. People always confess in writing, she said. Always. Trent rushed to finalize transferring the house to Monica. Tried to complete it before our court date. His attorney filed the deed transfer paperwork immediately. But something stopped it. The title company flagged the documents. Called me directly. Explained that the signature on the new transfer papers didn't match the signature from the original mortgage. They were required by law to verify identities on property transfers over a certain value. This was one of them. The notary refused to process it. 3 days later, the title company sent me official notification. They were launching an investigation into possible forgery on the refinancing documents from 6 months ago. Everything was unraveling. Trent's perfect plan was falling apart. The house he'd tried to steal and give to his girlfriend was now locked in legal limbo. He couldn't sell it, couldn't transfer it, couldn't do anything with it until the forgery investigation concluded. And that investigation would prove he'd committed fraud. Would prove everything I'd been saying was true. I took the stand during our temporary custody hearing. Darla walked me through everything carefully. The lockout, the forged signatures, the hidden assets, the surveillance camera, the fake therapy report. I showed emails, presented Monica's message about me being difficult, described sleeping in my
car,
losing access to our son, having my name erased from school records. The judge listened without interrupting, took notes, stared at Trent several times like he was a cockroach on a white tablecloth. Trent's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive. Said I was making false accusations because I was bitter about the divorce. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. Documents don't lie. Timelines don't lie. Forged signatures don't lie. When Darla finished presenting, the courtroom was silent. Even Trent looked smaller somehow. Less confident. His smug expression had disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. He was finally understanding that his plan had failed. That he'd underestimated me catastrophically. The judge ruled immediately on temporary custody. Said he'd seen enough to make a preliminary decision. He awarded temporary sole custody to me. Said Trent could have supervised visitation only until the fraud investigation concluded. The judge's words were harsh. Mr. Conway, you have systematically attempted to deprive your wife of her parental rights, her property rights, and her basic dignity. This court finds your behavior reprehensible and potentially criminal. Until further investigation, you will have limited contact with the minor child. Trent's jaw tightened. Hands clenched into fists. But he didn't speak.
couldn't speak.
Any outburst would make things worse. Miles ran to me after court, threw his arms around my waist. I hadn't seen him smile like that in months. Hadn't held him properly since being locked out. Can I come home with you now? He asked. I looked at Darla. She nodded. Yes, baby, I whispered. You're coming home. Even though home was still my sister's couch. Even though I had nothing. I had my son back. That was everything. Monica left 2 days after the custody ruling. I heard through the friend network. She'd moved out of the house suddenly. Taken all her things. Changed her relationship status on social media from in a relationship to nothing. Apparently, she hadn't known about Trent's financial situation. About the second mortgage he'd taken out just to maintain appearances. About the credit card debt he'd been hiding. About the fact that the house might be seized entirely due to the fraud investigation. She'd thought she was moving in with a successful man who owned property. Instead, she'd moved in with a fraud who was about to lose everything. She'd signed up for stolen luxury. Not for consequences. Not for poverty. Not for legal trouble. Women like Monica never stayed when the money ran out. She'd already found someone else according to the same friend. Another man with money and property. Trent was alone now. Just like he'd left me. Except I'd been innocent. He'd earned every bit of his isolation. The official deed arrived in the mail 3 weeks later. Certified. Legal. Final. Due to the forged signature and invalid transfer, the court had reversed all property paperwork from the past year. The refinancing was void. The deed was restored to its original state. But the judge had gone further. Ordered the property retitled solely in my name as compensation for Trent's fraud. For the emotional distress. For the violation of my rights. For attempting to steal marital assets. The same house he'd locked me out of. The same house I'd slept outside of in my car. The same house he'd promised to give Monica. It was mine now.
Completely mine. Legali mine.
Trent couldn't touch it. Couldn't claim it. Couldn't step foot in it without my permission. I held that deed in my hands and cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From vindication. From the sweet satisfaction of justice finally being served. Darla had been right. People who commit sloppy crimes get caught. Trent's arrogance had destroyed him. Trent moved into a one-bedroom rental apartment across town. He'd tried to appeal the judge's decision. Filed 3 separate motions. All denied. His attorney dropped him after the forged therapy report came to light. No lawyer wanted to be associated with his case anymore.
He was toxic.
Legally and professionally. He showed up at my sister's apartment once. Asked to talk. Said we could work something out. That he'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to lose everything. I looked at him through the door. This man who'd locked me out. Who'd forged my signature. Who'd tried to erase me from our son's life. Who'd humiliated me in front of friends and neighbors. You made this bed, I said calmly. Lie in it. He left with a duffel bag and a face full of regret. I felt nothing watching him go.
No satisfaction. No anger.
Just emptiness where love used to be.
He was a stranger now. Someone I used to know.
Someone who'd shown me exactly who he really was when he thought I was too weak to fight back. I walked through my front door with Miles beside me. The porch light was still broken. The wind chimes still tangled. The welcome mat still stained from where the groceries had melted that first day. But when I stepped inside, I didn't feel grief or anger. I felt ownership. Felt peace settling into my bones. This was my house. My space. My home. Miles ran to his room to check on his things. Make sure they were still there. I stood in the kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals. Where I'd packed lunches. Where I'd baked birthday cakes. It looked the same, but felt different. Lighter somehow. We made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Simple. Easy. Delicious. Miles laughed at something on his phone. The sound filled the house with warmth. I realized I'd stopped holding my breath. Stopped waiting for something terrible to happen. I was home. Finally.
Completely.
And I owned all of it.
The house. The peace.
The future. And most importantly, myself. Trent had tried to break me. Instead, he'd shown me exactly how strong I'd always been.